History loves polishing monsters until they look like role models. In this video, we're tearing the halo off 10 famous heroes who were iconic, admired, and in real life, absolute nightmares. Some were hypocrites, some were sadists, and some managed to be both before breakfast. By the end, these schoolbook legends are going to look a lot less shiny. Number 1. Pythagoras, the triangle cult leader. We usually meet Pythagoras as the gentle grandfather of triangles, a man who probably smelled of chalk and ancient wisdom. In reality, his inner circle looked less like a math club and much more like a bizarre spiritual brotherhood fueled by secrecy, rituals, and a very specific hatred for beans. Pythagorean followers lived under a heavy shroud of silence. You weren't just a student, you were a devotee in a mystical sect. Their most famous restriction? A total ban on beans. Pythagoras believed beans were spiritually linked to death, impurity, and even the wandering souls of the deceased. Flatulence wasn't just a social faux pas, it was a rhythmic leak of the human soul. But the gentle mathematician image really shatters when you look at how he handled dissent. Ancient tradition suggests that when a member named Hippasus discovered irrational numbers, a mathematical truth that broke Pythagoras' perfect worldview, the group didn't give him a medal, they allegedly threw him off a boat. Whether he drowned or was simply exiled, the message was clear. In this math club, curiosity was a death sentence if it ruined the vibe. Pythagoras didn't just want to solve for a squared plus b squared equals c squared. He wanted to run a silent anti-bean empire where the numbers always behaved. Number 2. Thomas Jefferson, the eloquent hypocrite. Thomas Jefferson penned one of the most beautiful sentences in political history, then spent the rest of his life acting like it came with a giant invisible asterisk. The man who famously declared that all men are created equal was, at that very moment, the owner of hundreds of human beings. Over his lifetime, Jefferson enslaved more than 600 people. This wasn't a minor embarrassment he was dragged into by the times. He was an active manager of the system. He relied on forced labor to fund his expensive tastes, his sprawling estate at Monticello, and his public image as a refined intellectual. When debts pressed him, he didn't sacrifice his wine collection, he sold people. Jefferson was perhaps the most articulate man in the Atlantic world. He knew exactly what liberty meant, yet he chose convenience over principle every single day. He freed only a tiny fraction of the people he held captive, mostly members of the Hemings family. His words were revolutionary sparks that changed the world, but his plantation was just old-fashioned brutality with better handwriting. Few people in history have ever stood on such a high moral pedestal while resting their feet on such a trapdoor of hypocrisy. Number 3. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the parenting expert who rage quit. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was Europe's celebrity expert on how children should be raised. His book, Emile, was treated as a masterpiece of tender philosophy, lecturing parents on innocence, natural growth, and how the evil influence of adults ruins a child's spirit. He was the original gentle parenting influencer. There was just one tiny glaring problem. While Rousseau was writing the manual on how to love and guide children, he was busy abandoning his own. According to his own confessions, Rousseau sent all 5 of his newborn children to the Paris Foundling Hospital. In the 18th century, infant survival rates in these institutions were so grim that sending a baby there was essentially a death sentence, or at best, total moral abandonment in a powdered wig. His excuses ranged from being too poor to being too busy with his work. Apparently, the philosopher who lectured an entire continent on the sacred duty of fatherhood couldn't fit the actual job into his schedule. Rousseau basically invented modern educational theory and then immediately rage quit the tutorial. He loved humanity in the abstract, but he couldn't stand the actual humans he helped create. Number 4. Thomas Edison, the corporate saboteur.
Thomas Edison is usually packaged as the Wizard of Menlo Park, a cheerful genius sprinkling light bulbs across civilization like industrial fairy dust. But the real Edison wasn't a fairy. He was a ruthless empire builder who viewed invention as a blood sport. During the War of Currents, Edison didn't just want to win a business deal. He wanted to destroy his rivals, specifically Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse. To prove that his competitors' alternating current, or AC, was dangerous, Edison helped fund public death theaters. He oversaw the electrocution of stray dogs, cats, and even a circus elephant named Topsy, all to terrify the public into staying away from his rival's tech. He was territorial, manipulative, and more than willing to weaponize public panic for a better profit margin. He didn't just want to light up the world, he wanted the entire future of electricity to have his logo stamped on it. If you were a genius who didn't work for him, you weren't a colleague, you were a target to be crushed, sued, or smeared.
Number 5. William Shakespeare, the Bard of Hoarding. We remember Shakespeare as a magical literary being who floated above the grubby reality of life in a cloud of sonnets. We picture him agonizing over a quill in a candlelit room, purely focused on the human soul. But the historical William Shakespeare was also a very practical, very hard-nosed businessman who knew exactly where the money was. Records from Stratford-upon-Avon paint a picture of a man who was deeply involved in the grain and malt trade during a time of extreme shortage and famine. While his neighbors were literally starving, the bard was tied to hoarding supplies, reselling grain at a profit, and engaging in aggressive legal disputes over small debts. This doesn't mean he personally invented famine, but it smashes the image of the delicate artist. Shakespeare understood greed, ambition, and the itching palm so well because he was living that life. He was a landlord and a shareholder who made sure his investments stayed healthy while the world burned. Somewhere between writing Hamlet and managing his hidden grain stocks, the halo slipped off very quietly. Number 6. Julius Caesar, the genocidal celebrity. Julius Caesar is usually sold as the dazzling general who conquered Gaul and reshaped Rome. He's the man of the Veni, Vidi, Vici catchphrase, the ultimate strategist. But if you look at the conquest of Gaul from any perspective other than Caesar's own PR department, the picture turns blood red. His campaigns involved the mass enslavement of hundreds of thousands and the destruction of entire ethnic groups. Modern historians often discuss Caesar's actions in Gaul in terms of genocide. He wasn't just expanding borders, he was clearing out populations to pay off his massive personal debts and build his political brand. Caesar wrote his own history books, the commentaries, portraying himself as a noble civilizer, but he was standing on a mountain of corpses to do it. Rome got the glory, Caesar got immortality, and Gaul got turned into a cemetery. We call him great today, mostly because conquerors always sound better once they've been carved in marble and are no longer around to answer for the screams of the people they civilized. Number 7. John Harvey Kellogg, the cereal crusader. John Harvey Kellogg gave the world breakfast cereal, which sounds like a wholesome, sun-drenched contribution to society. But Kellogg didn't view cornflakes as a snack. He viewed them as a weapon in a holy war against human pleasure, specifically the sin of masturbation. Kellogg believed that spicy or flavorful foods inflamed the passions. He created bland, tasteless cornflakes as a healthy way to suppress sexual urges. He wanted to make eating so joyless that your body would stop having dangerous ideas. His sanitarium in Michigan was a place of bizarre treatments where pleasure was the enemy and plain grains were the cure. The story gets darker when you realize Kellogg was also a massive advocate for eugenics. He founded the Race Betterment Foundation and wanted to regulate society with the same clinical coldness he used to regulate the human gut. The smiling man on the cereal box was actually a radical who wanted to control your appetite, your bedroom, and the gene pool itself. Imagine making breakfast so boring that it came with its own totalitarian ideology. Number 8. George Washington, the loophole accountant.
George Washington is the steady father of his country, the man of Republican virtue who famously refused to be king. But even the most honorable founder had a disturbing habit of letting his principles end where his comfort began. When Pennsylvania passed a gradual abolition law, it stated that any enslaved person brought into the state would automatically be freed after 6 months of residency. Instead of respecting the spirit of the law or the liberty he supposedly fought for, Washington became a master of the 6-month shuffle. He would move the enslaved people he held, like his chef Hercules or his seamstress Oni Judge, out of the state just before the 6-month deadline hit, resetting the clock so they could never claim their freedom. He wasn't just a passive participant in slavery, he was an active manager, using legal maneuvers to block human beings from escaping. The man who became a global symbol of liberty was quietly scheduling human movement like a loophole accountant with presidential posture.
Number 9. Albert Einstein, the cold cosmic genius. Albert Einstein redefined space and time, but his private life suggests he had a much harder time understanding basic empathy. When his first marriage to Mileva Maric was collapsing, he didn't offer a heart-to-heart. He offered a cold, contractual list of conditions that treated his wife like a domestic servant. The list was brutal. She was expected to keep his clothes in order, serve 3 meals a day to his room, and most tellingly, renounce all personal relations with him. She was ordered to stop talking the moment he demanded it, and to leave his study immediately without protest. He basically asked her to become a silent, non-intimate domestic appliance. Einstein could explain the behavior of light and the curvature of the universe, but he acted like kindness was a disputed theory. It's a harsh reminder that massive intellectual brilliance doesn't guarantee a shred of basic decency. He had a unified field theory for the cosmos, but no formula for how to treat the person sitting in the next room. Number 10. Saint Olga of Kiev, the Saint of Vengeance. Saint Olga is a towering figure in Eastern European history, a saintly ruler and a pioneer of Christianity. But her origin story reads like a revenge flick directed by someone who thought the John Wick movies were too tame. After her husband, Prince Igor, was killed by the Drevlian tribe, Olga didn't just mourn. She unleashed a series of punishments that were theatrical and terrifying. She invited the Drevlian envoys to a feast and buried them alive. She invited another group to a bathhouse and burned them inside. Finally, she supposedly demanded a tribute of birds from a Drevlian city, tied smoldering embers to their feet, and sent them back to burn the entire city to the ground. History calls her a saint, but her path to holiness was paved with creative, operatic retaliation. She didn't just hold a grudge, she turned it into statecraft with pyrotechnics. Olga is the ultimate proof that saint is a title often given to survivors who were simply too scary for anyone to stop. History isn't just a list of heroes, it's a collection of people who were very good at one thing while being very bad at others. These legends weren't saints. They were humans with egos, flaws, and dark sides that the history books usually try to edit out.